gonna swim, bike, and run. In the corner, sun, we're gonna swim, bike, and run. In the corner, sun, 2021.
Thank you, Poncho Man. Always great to see you. Again, this is Breakfast with Bob, the Not Quite Kona edition. We are brought to you by Challenge North America, Credo Tri, Hope to Own a VeloFix, Normatec, Canyon Bikes, and of course, our Challenged Athletes Foundation. We just sent out 3,038 grants, totaling $5.1 million to keep challenged athletes in the game of life through sport. And a gentleman who really helped take challenged athletes and show that they could accomplish anything joins us right now, Mr. Craig Blanchette, one of my favorite athletes in history. Craig, how you doing, brother?
You know, I'm doing fantastic. It is good to see you again. Well, all the way back from the early days when we were doing the Kenny Souza
wheelchair criterium.
Yeah.
Got that right here, brother.
Yeah.
Here we go. You on the cover.
Teal and orange and pink.
Just doing it. You know, your sound sounds a little low, Craig. Can you turn your sound up a little?
Yeah, you betcha. How's that? Better?
That's way better.
Perfect. Yeah, it's great. It's great to see you again. It's been I have such great memories of the wild and crazy things that we were doing, and we were just, going from one race to the next, and you look back on it and you go, whoa, I had no idea what that was all going to be about later on.
So let's go back. You're born with a birth defect,
Mm-hmm.
and so basically, were your legs amputated at a certain point, or were they just not there?
Yeah, they were basically. I was born without femurs. Okay. So, I got short legs. I'm 3'9", short, tall, whatever. I just talked to a guy the other day, and I said, "Man, you're really tall." He goes, "Only from the legs down." And I said, "Well, I'm only short from the legs down." It's pretty much it. The rest of me's pretty normal size. My legs are just short, but I did have my my right foot. I had a kind of a foot on my right side, and I was wearing artificial legs. So there was an amputation to wear artificial limbs, oddly enough, which I never wear anymore. They're too slow. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. Just been born this way. I don't have any paralysis. I have normal function and all that, blood pressure. So all those things, it's pretty normal life. It's just a vertically challenged life at times.
Proximal femoral focal deficiency, PFFD. And
Yep.
Finding sport. I know you got into wrestling, I think in 6th grade. Was that like your first foray into organized sport?
I would say it was the little bit before that. They had some organized events. Of course, this is back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And they had some organized events, and it was paired up with the organization, the amazing organization, the Special Olympics. Yeah. And so the Special Olympics has morphed into mental disabilities or mental challenges, impairments. And because now we have the Paralympic movement, but back in the early 80s, in Springfield, Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, yeah, they just had divisions and different things. And so I did a little bit of some, just fun, did a little bit of wrestling and, like the beanbag toss, there was like an obstacle course, which I thought was fantastic. And so a little bit of that. Then we morphed into middle school, and wrestling was available to me. And so I jumped in on that, did a little bit of swimming as well, but it just kind of exploring what this whole athletic thing was all about.
So you're wrestling at 106 pounds, you get 12 wins, 6 losses in your high school career. How did the other wrestlers who you're competing with, how did they take it when they go out in the mat? It's like one of those, it's sort of like I'm going to lose either way here. If I beat this guy, I beat this guy without legs. Yeah. If I don't, I lost to a guy with legs.
Yeah,
you're in a pretty good position.
I never thought about that. It's a lose-lose situation,
Yeah.
and back in the day, of course, there wasn't all this virtue signaling and all this crazy culture stuff that we have today. So I think it was just about competing. It was more of a pure thing. And it was more just straight sport. And now the interesting thing about competing back then is while I had an advantage in the upper body, I had a disadvantage in leverage and in lower body strength. So, when I would get out there to compete with guys, the ones that weren't sure what to do mentally, I could take them. The guys that I had more skill, I could win. But there was guys that were state champions and they smoked me. I mean, it was over. It was quick business. So, and it should have been. It quite frankly should have been.
Swimming, weightlifting, wrestling, and then wheelchair sports, 1984.
Yeah.
And first race was what? Wheels of Fire, Seattle. 80?
Yeah, that was the first pro race. Yeah, and that I got my first racing chair. My grandpa bought me this racing chair. It's just over $1,000, and it was just more of like my first bike, kind of.
Sure,
I guess.
Freedom.
And I'm rolling around on this thing, and it's faster than my skateboard, and it's faster than my everyday chair, and I'm able to go for long. I had no idea. I just thought this was fun, and I enjoyed it. And then I met a guy, Kevin Hansen, who became just an amazing friend, and he became my coach and coached me through all of it. And he was in a wheelchair too, and I was like, I saw him cruising by. I was in my mom's house, and he went strolling by, and I'm like, I'd never seen another racing wheelchair before, and I'm like, hey, I got one of those. And I kind of, I didn't even have my wheelchair thing. I just chased him down the street crawling, and I was like, hey, come back here, and we became fast friends. And actually what's funny, I had no idea. I just thought maybe I came up to him, I go, hey, what's your name? He says, Kevin. I go, hey, maybe we can ride together sometime. I've got one of those too. And he's like, well, I just live around the corner. Why don't you stop by sometime? He had no idea, I think, that I had no idea that I was going to be this kind of an athlete. And I had no idea he was that kind of a coach. And so we sort of found each other, and oh my goodness, we made history many times.
Totally. 87, you win Gasparilla 15K, breaking the world record. Now in 88, I think huge breakthrough when wheelchair sports went to the Olympics in Seoul. Yeah. And this is, were there even Paralympics at that point?
There were Stoke Mandeville games, and I think Paralympics, the 88 was the first year they were kind of getting started. Yeah. They had kind of their separate, Stoke Mandeville was really the wheelchair sports movement, is where it started back in England.
But that exhibition, being in Seoul and being at the Olympics, that had to be so cool.
Oh, it was unlike anything else. That was actually a interesting thing, because there were other people there, Ann Cody, there was, Candace Cable, there was, Sean Hendricks, Hendricks. And all these guys. And some of the other Americans that were there, I was the only American male that made the final. And some of the athletes, because I wasn't sure, should I be like, what? This is crazy? Or should I be like, this is just another race? Don't make this a bigger deal than it needs to be. And I really didn't know how to act about the whole thing. And some people were like, no, this is just, think of it as another race and go out and work hard, and don't psych yourself out. I don't know. So I was just, there was a lot of things going on in my mind for that race, but it was an experience to race representing the great country, the United States, and then also representing adaptive sports. It was just phenomenal.
Well, and especially you get a bronze, and there was less than a second separating first, second, and third.
9/10 of a second. Yeah. Second and third was 6/10 of a second. Yeah. Don't remind me of that. Yeah. They were right there, like right there.
Right there. But so cool for the sport.
Well, and that taught me a lot. Actually, there's a bit about that race, because I hadn't, just to give you a little bit of lead up to it, not to go into too much detail, but I started racing on the track and I had never lost in any preliminary, the national championships, the Olympic trials, everything, all the prelims, all the semifinals, all the finals, everything. I won everything. Then we went over to Belgium and we did our prelims outside of the Olympic Games.
Yep.
At the Saint-Denis, France, a big, humongous 70,000 people in the stands. It was like a football stadium for track and field. And I won the prelims. I won the semifinals. I won the, all that. And I even won my final, which was the semis. And I won everything. I didn't realize that there was another guy named Mustafa Badid was winning everything too. And we had never competed.
Right.
And so we get into the final and I'm thinking, I'm on my game. I've got everything dialed in. And I had almost everything dialed in. I led from wire to wire. Actually, what happened is we took off at the start and I looked back at the first corner and I saw a 40-meter gap within the first 100 yards of the race. It's unheard of. Like, we haven't even really got to the first corner yet. And I look back and I see nobody. Well, what I didn't realize is they were off to my right shoulder.
Oh, they were right there.
They were right there. I didn't see them. And so I hit the corner and I'm like, cool, boom, boom, boom. I'm going to go wire to wire. I'm going to dial it in. I'm going to kill it. And I'm cruising around the track and the crowd's USA, USA. And I'm just, we get to 300 meters to go. And I've got video of this. I drop the hammer. I'm off the front, going to win easily. And I decide to drop the hammer and lay everything I have left out there on the line. And I sprint down the back stretch. Why? There's no need to sprint. No. And I come through the last corner and all of a sudden out of my right eye, I see a wheel. And I'm like, where did that come from? That's not cool. This is not appropriate. Right. And they started coming around me. And I think I had about another 5% in me. And I tried to muster some kind of a sprint. But what it taught me that day, as I crossed the finish line, feeling defeated, feeling angry, feeling, a victim of a better strategy, quite frankly. And it's not like I was letting them pass me. If I was going to go out and lead, why would today, if I were racing and somebody went to the front, I'd be like, have a good time up there, brother. Yes, sir. All right. Yeah, see you later. And so it taught me how to win many races for the next, 25 years, that I not only raced with my body and my equipment, but also with my mind and my strategy.
So was it 89? Is that when Nike approached you?
Right after the games. I had an equipment sponsorship going into the games, but coming out of the games within 3 months, they were like, hey, let's do something. And I was like, that sounds fantastic.
So here's a company that makes running shoes.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that ironic?
For a guy with no legs.
Yeah.
That ad, that cross-training ad that they created, if you play in racquetball and you play in basketball without showing, right? Without showing a wheel.
Right. And the big reveal at the end. Yep.
That was so cool.
What's interesting is the way that all these things were kind of set up, because they had me come down to LA and shoot another commercial where there was just like a 7-second blip, or maybe not even that. And I was just part of another group of wheelchair racers that was sort of in a race. But I'm such a people person that I went to, like, even though they didn't call me on set at these other locations, I found out where they were and I showed up to everything, and I was getting to know everybody I could. And they saw me hanging out with the other athletes, the other able-bodied athletes playing basketball. Right. And they saw me, just shooting the breeze with these different people all around. And one of the guys from Wyden and Kennedy was there and was like, wait a minute, this guy. And the whole thing how that whole thing came about. It's crazy.
That is so cool. And you were with Nike for what, like 8 years or something?
Yeah. 8 years. Well, you've done your research, Bob. Look at you, man.
You're on it. I didn't go to school to eat my lunch.
I know, right? So yeah, it was awesome. It was really awesome.
89, George Murray, I think, had the record of 3:59.4 for the mile. Yeah. And you go 3:51. And it wasn't like when you showed up that day, the wind was howling, right? Yeah. It wasn't a day where you thought you're going to be breaking anything, but you took over 8 seconds off the mile.
Yeah. I look back at some of these things and I think, who was that guy? Like, I mean, because it seems, I don't know, when you've been around, I'm 52 now, and my racing career is like, it's like a really cool movie that I watched like 10 times. Yeah. But it's like this memory of like, who was that guy? But yeah, we got out to Hayward Field. And of course, this is my hometown crowd. I train on that track. I live essentially in the town next door. And, it was a 1 mile race. And it was important to me. And there was a lot of wind that came out of the north there. And so the backstretch, it was rough going into that wind, but you also had a tailwind on the other side. And I remember my coach, Kevin, he said at either, we're going to drop the hammer at either 300 meters or 600 meters. And you look over at me, and if I nod my head, that means drop the hammer. And I'm like, okay. And so I had the presence of mind, I'm out there and I'm training, and I look over at 600 meters, and he drops his head. And I'm thinking, 600 meters out? What are you kidding? I was like, okay. And I just blasted it, and of course, world records, many world records, 21 world records over my whole career. And the mile world record was one that we set and broke many times.
An 8 world championship titles.
And that's 9 now. Can you believe that?
What?
9. Yeah. I started racing off-road hand cycles.
Very cool.
And in 2019, I went to the World Championships in Colorado at 10,000 feet, way up there at Crested Butte. And it was 6 events over 2 days, from a downhill to a time trial to a obstacle course to a hill climb, and you got points and all this stuff. And I just went out there, and it was like I was back in my early days, and it was fun, Bob. I'm telling you what, it was awesome.
Well, what was fascinating to me, that was such a great era, because you had Rafael Olvera, you had Jim Knaub, the battles between Craig Blanchette and Jim Knaub, and we both know that rivalries makes.
Oh yeah, like, Doug Kennedy, Paul Wiggins. There was
Molinati, all the guys, right? And
Scott Hollenbeck, don't forget him.
Yeah. But what's so cool about that is here you had the Olympic trials pole vaulter who was paralyzed, right, and won Boston 5 times and LA 3 times, and then you had Craig Blanchette, a guy with no legs, and who was winning everything on the track and Olympic. So the two of you, that rivalry was pretty cool. But at the same time, the rivalry also helps grow a sport. I remember Jim Knaub telling me, hey, no parent is out there wanting their kid to be in a wheelchair. So it's hard to think about that think of us as a sport. So what makes sport is rivalry. Someone has to wear the black hat, someone has to wear the white hat. And in your case, here's a guy with the pink hair, with the pink van, and Knaub with the leopard outfits and zebra and whatever the hell he wanted to wear, Dalmatians.
Yeah,
you guys brought personality to this sport that nobody knew anything about. And did you guys talk about that? Did you realize it? You guys were. It
was organic. It literally just happened. And, I think about like Andre Agassi and Pete Sampras.
Yep.
Both fantastic, tennis players. One's pretty flamboyant and pretty out there and pushing the envelope, and the other's more, stoic and fantastic, sport. And Knaub and I, it's like, we never talked about it, but there was definitely a rivalry, and there was people would say Jim Knaub is canoeing, and there was these different jokes about how you said his last name. And I just heard about this reputation this guy had, that he was fierce, but that he was also, kind of a prima donna, and that he wasn't always super friendly, and I give him all the grace in the world, because people thought that about me too. And it's sometimes we're just up in our head. I mean, Sherry Ramsey, recently we went, we've been reacquainted and we've become friends now. And when we were over in hand cycle racing in Europe, and she said, yeah, you were kind of stuck up and kind of conceited and kind of intimidating and kind of a jerk. And I was like, what? I mean, I didn't realize I was any of those things. I was all up in my head watching the gears and watching the, just thinking through the strategies and trying to hold it all together, quite honestly, but it came off to her as different. And I'm sure Knaub was, he was a tactician, and he wanted to play the full sport, including the one where you can take somebody out before the start gun ever goes off. Yeah. And that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. So 87, 89, and 91, you win over 100K in prize money. Gasparilla, Lilac Bloomsday, Peachtree. Yeah. And people don't understand that back in the day, that was a circuit, right? There was some good money to be made in the racing chair.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
Then hand cycles came along, right? And racing chair is hard for the average person to get into. Mm-hmm. And with the hand cycle, do you think that creation of the hand cycle, the onset of the hand cycle, did that lead to racing chairs sort of disappearing in terms of dollars and in terms of support?
No, I don't think so. Actually, I think that a couple things. There's no money in the money that's involved in wheelchair sport. Mm-hmm. Road racing, track racing, things like that. That's more akin to running, marathons, triathlon, all that kind of stuff. And so not triathlons necessarily, but there's money in running sport, and there has been for a while. And there's money in wheelchair road racing, and there has been for a while. It's incredible now. You can make, in 4 races, you can make $100,000. Boston, New York, London, all those, London, you get a $25,000 first place prize money. I mean, that's nuts. When I switched over from wheelchair racing, because I kind of did everything I wanted to do there. Yeah. I mean, I would have loved to win Boston. I got second. Dang it, but that's another story. But when I switched over to hand cycling, there was no money. I mean, zero. I mean, if you got $200 for a win, that was a big race, And so there was some sponsorship. You had to work the backside, and there wasn't a lot of team racing. I tried to develop that with Freedom Rider and some team racing stuff, and of course Nike had some bonuses for winning and world records and world championships and things like that. But the sport of cycling, and that's very similar to the way it is in able-bodied cycling. The money comes through the teams, not through necessarily winning the race.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And you won hand cycling titles in 2000 and 2001. And so getting married in 1992, becoming a dad, but you're obviously still incredibly fit, and you do more off-road hand cycling now, or what's your love? What's your passion?
Yeah. What I'm doing now, I'm a transformation lifestyle coach. And so I've been doing this for 11 years. And so I had gained 50 pounds, Bob, and I was selling computers. I was doing all that, raising a family, and I became kind of a chunky fat guy. And, I wasn't able to fit in my wheelchair very easily. Good thing they had those side guards, because boy, things were rough. And so I had a career change. I started working with a health coach, started getting the extra body fat off. And so part of that was, getting back into wheelchair racing, and hand cycling, because I had lost my weight and I was still in my, early 40s. So I was like, if I'm going to make a run at this again, I've had about 10 years away from wheelchair racing. If I'm going to make a run at it and go back into developing technology and pushing the envelope with aerodynamics and all those kinds of things that I love to do, I gotta, there's a biological clock ticking. So I got to get on it. And so I did. So I lost my 50. I started training again, started getting back into shape, was really coming back coming back strong, and then did some hand cycling as well. And now I would say, I do spin classes 3 days a week on Zoom. I actually been doing that for 6 years, but it got really popular around March of 2020.
Really? Wow, what a surprise. Yeah.
And we were going to do 1 month, and they just keep showing up. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they keep showing up, and so we have 20 to 30 people that ride from they're all ability levels. Lots of people have full function of everything, and they ride stationary bikes. Some people are hand cycles. Some people are on wheelchairs, whatever. And it's just an all-comer great thing. And it's been a really great community that's developed from that. So I do that to stay in shape. Of course, with my coaching, I'm still learning and growing, and habit loops and micro habits and all this, all these kinds of things. But then I've been mostly now I do road hand cycling and off-road hand cycling. And those are kind of the things. Off-road hand cycling, I mean, you've probably been on a mountain bike, I'm sure. It's way slower. It's just so different. I mean, you're out in the woods and you're not just trying to hang on the wheel in front of you and sweating and breathing and just trying to hold the draft at 22 miles an hour for as long as you can go. You're out there and you're like, that's a butterfly. Oh my goodness, look at that eagle. I mean, it's amazing. And then you get to the top of the hill. Hopefully you had a chairlift to get you up there. And then you get to bomb downhill with jumps and berms and turns. And so you got all that. And anyway, it's just been this whole new world. I've really never been unmotorized out in the wilderness,
right,
by human power. It's awesome. So I ride for Lasher Sport, and it's just opened up this whole new world of like adventure. It's awesome.
That is cool. Actually, we work with a company, and if you've seen the Grit Freedom Chair, I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, I think so. The Freedom Chair. Yeah.
So we had 90 requests for Grit Freedom Chairs for grants this year.
And that's got those big levers, right? And the single, yeah.
Wheelchair bound folks off road. Some guys from MIT created this company, and it's been phenomenal. So talk a little bit about your co-director, National Wheelchair Sports Camp.
Yeah.
How long you've been doing that? And that sounds like such a fun.
I found out, and these names, you're going to recognize these names. So I went to Kaiser Roll, big wheelchair race back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I show up there, I think it was 1989, maybe 87. And of course, you got Jim Knaub there, you got Jim Martinson there, you got Paul Van Winkle, I think Doug Kennedy was around. You got, Andre Vigier, all these guys, and everybody's there. It's Kaiser Roll. And I think that was my first defeat of my professional career. And I lost to Håkan Eriksson from Sweden just by that much. And, but that's another story. Anyway, at the end of the race, I see all these people getting on this bus, and I'm like, hey, Rafi, because Rafi and I became fast friends. And I said, where are they going? He goes, they're going to Wheelchair Sports Camp. I go, what? Wheelchair Sports Camp? That sounds fantastic, And so he said, but my flight was going back, so I couldn't go that year. But the next year, I went ahead and booked my ticket to, for an extra week. And so that was my first year at Wheelchair Sports Camp. This year is our 35th year, and I've been going since the second year. And now I'm the national director. So somebody put me in charge, I guess. And, so I've been running the camp for the last 5 years with, and Bob Bardwell and Jim Martinson essentially founded it. And it's Bob Bardwell's in a wheelchair. And so he lives on this big ranch, and he's been building this thing for 40 years, and everything's accessible. It's still in the woods, but it's everything's accessible. And so we promote this thing. We have people come from all over the world, and we usually get 50 people to come. The beauty of this particular camp, and I remember Sherry Schultz, she was Sherry Ramsey back in the day, but Sherry Schultz, I talked to her about coming to this event, and she said, well, I don't know. Cause most of the time you think of wheelchair camps as for up to 18 years old, 0 to 18. And I was like, oh, no. This is all ages. I mean, if you have a wheelchair and you want to come have fun, you can come. Yeah. And so we have from 6 years old on up to about 75 years old. Right. And we just go play and we do some crazy things out there. I mean, it's what's awesome at Wheelchair Sports Camp is some of these people have never been to camp and they've never been in an environment with their peers where they're the majority. Right. You look around and you may be the only person in your town that's in a wheelchair. That's true. Well, you come to Wheelchair Sports Camp and you're looking around and everybody's got wheels. And so like on the first day, people are kind of warming up to camp. And I'm like, hey, we're going to go do this now. And they're like, I'm not sure about doing that. And I said, oh yeah, no, it's good. We're doing it. And then, sometimes you throw them out of their wheelchair and then they get back in and then they get, we call them camp tattoos. That's basically scabs, and we just get out there and pretty by the end of the week, they're just like, they're in this strange place that they've never experienced on planet Earth where everything's accessible and nobody says, I can't do that, or I can't do this. Cause that excuse has to be left at the gate, because we're all in wheelchairs. That doesn't work here. What are you talking about? Your legs don't work. So
I love that. When is this camp and where is it?
It's in Rochester, Minnesota. And this year it's going to be June 12th through the 17th. Last year we pulled a fast one and developed our first ever virtual wheelchair sports camp. We had over 100 people, from all over the country, and it worked out. We used Zoom and we got creative, and we're going back face to face. The camp theme this year is Together Again, and we've got like 36 people registered, and we're going to get out there, and we've got obstacle courses, and we've got zip lines, and we've got water skiing and horseback riding, and it's just fantastic.
It sounds amazing. It really does. I love that. And that's right. Actually, it's right around the Paralympic trials are in Minnesota, that same time frame.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And last year they were going to have them and then they got canceled, but yeah, they're right around that same time. And they've got some up and coming, pretty stud athletes that are from Minnesota that grew up coming to wheelchair camp. And so they're going to be there competing, and it's awesome. It's a great time. It's a highlight of my year, and it's just unlike anything else I've ever been around. And it's just an honor to be organizing it. And, we're developing leaders and junior leaders and we have teams and so there's some competition, but there's also just a lot of just participation. And it's just Raphael and Scott and Jim Martinson. And these guys come every year. And so we've become lifelong friends. It's just been awesome.
Cool. That is so cool. So when you look back at your racing career, is there one race that sticks out as your best race ever?
Best race. Oof.
It might not be just so much from winning, but a race that meant the most to you.
Well, the one that taught me the most was the Olympics. And ow, that one still hurts. Bob.
Less than a second.
But there was there's a rivalry. I raced for many years, and I was at the top of my game. Likelihood, like there was 3 or 4 years in there where out of 12 or 13 races, I only got second once. Like I dominated everything. Yeah. No, and so there was rivalries. Paul Van Winkle was an early rivalry. Jim Knaub was an early rivalry. So every time I showed up to race, that was the guy that was going to give me fits that day, and then Paul Wiggins, that guy gave me just fits. But there was this guy from Alabama named Doug Kennedy. And that guy, he gave me fits. And
he won our crit one year, that wheelchair crit.
It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. Well, he said something that taught me a life lesson. And then I'll tell you a story about the satisfying one time when I beat him. He said to me one day, because he was a higher level, so his legs up in his chest, and he was a higher level. So he had more paralysis and things were a little bit challenging, whatever, And he said to me one day, because we're racing in the open division, we're down there in Torrance racing the Criterium, and we're at LA Marathon, and we're at these different races, And I know all of those races because you were part of all that stuff. And He told me one time, I think he was being interviewed for Road Race of the Month, back in those glory days. And he said, there's one thing about this racing, Craig. He said, it's easier for you because you're not paralyzed and you don't have this extra weight, of these extra legs and all these things. He goes, but it doesn't matter that it's easier for you. He says, the reality, though, is they only give the first place trophy to one person. And that's the one that crosses the finish line first, no matter what their excuses are. Yeah. And so he was like, I can be the champion of excuses, or I can be the champion. And he chose to be the champion. And he did. He did beat me a few times. And the first race that he ever beat me at, there was a rule change, and the chairs went from 120 centimeters to no length limit, because the chairs back in the day were so short that you could literally touch the guy in front of you. Right. Like it was short. And when they extended the front wheel way out in front, it took a lot of the weight off that front wheel, which is not very efficient. Most of the weight was on the back wheels. And the first race was in Alabama, and it was the Vulcan Run. And, I think I had an older chair and he had this new longer chair, and he dropped me. He left me in the dust. And I was like, it was the last race of the year, Bob. I had won everything, every race. And the last race of the year, he smokes me. And I'm like, that's just uncool. It's not fun. That was not good, but it was actually really good. And so that was like in October, November. Well, the next year they had the big 10K down in Australia. And so now I had all winter to train with the longer chair and to elevate. Because when you're racing to win, everybody gets faster every year. So you have to, if you're running in 5th or 10th place, you have to get faster. Right? Because we're all going to be faster the next year. So you got to be faster than they're faster. Right? And it's such a weird thing to say, but it's true. And so we go down there to Australia, and there was a track race. They did some track racing, and then they did the 10K. And so, about the technology I had with Nike, and we had these special gloves and special material. And one of the advantages that I developed with Nike is that if it was wet, rained, or dry, I didn't have any challenges with my friction on my gloves, so I didn't slip in the rain. Yeah. And everybody else that was using the standard clister, the tape and all that stuff, if it rained, they had to dip into some special glue stuff, and it was a mess. And so, right before the 1,500 meter race, it was a tsunami. It was just poured down rain. It was like it left like a half an inch on the track. It was puddles everywhere. And so, of course, this is what I learned at the Olympics. You got to race with your strategy, you got to race with tactics, and you got to race with your body and mind and training. You got to put it all together. And so I knew that the track had puddles on it. And of course, Doug just beat me. The last time we raced, he beat me. He didn't beat me. He smoked me. Yeah. And so I said, I'm going to race with everything. So the gun goes off, and I went right to the front, and I knew he would hop in my draft, and I ran right through the first water puddle. Well, what did that do? Threw up a rooster tail, smoked, just drenched his hands and his gloves and everything, and he was slipping the rest of the race. And I dropped the hammer, and I beat him. And I was like, that was an experience of racing completely legal, but allowing my technology, my strategy, my tactics, and my physical abilities to using it all to win.
Love it. Hey, so we started our Challenge Athletes Foundation.
Yeah. What an organization, Bob. I mean, seriously, what an organization. Unbelievable.
Yeah. 30,000 grants, $135 million that I've
received 2 of your grants. I don't know if you know that. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
Greg,
it's been a while ago. You guys bought me a snow ski a long time ago back in the day.
that's so cool.
Anyway, so yeah.
I love what you're doing. I need to find out more about this National Wheelchair Sports Camp.
Oh
So
yeah.
some of our folks can apply for grants to get there, because that's
Oh.
that makes a ton of sense.
Mhm.
Just being in a camp like that with all other wheelers is
Yeah.
just cuts down the barriers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for taking time, Craig. So great to catch up with you, man. How many kids and how old?
I've got grandkids now. Can you believe
Oh
that?
my God.
I know. So I've got a 28-year-old son, Quincy. He's married, and he's given us two granddaughters. Scout,
wow.
who's 4, and Winter, she's about a year and a half. And they're just delightful. Oh, so much fun. We go on bike rides and we have so much fun. And then my younger son, what's that?
You'd be that cool granddad.
Yeah.
You know,
She calls me Papa. Papa, let's go ride. Okay. And then we got Alexander. He's my younger boy, and he's married, and he has a son named Clark. He's just over a year old. And so, yeah, it's phenomenal. It's just unbelievable. What a amazing privilege I've had to meet all these people and have these experiences and challenge myself and race and grow. And it's just amazing.
Love it. I love what you've done for wheelchair sports. It's just letting people know that there's no reason not to go to the start line, right? You can accomplish anything.
Your legs don't work? What's the problem?
Do something else. You do that.
Come on, brother.
Craig Blanchette has been our guest again on the cover. Fun story on this is my staff was like, you can't put a guy on a cover of our magazine without legs. Nobody's going to pick up the magazine. I'm like, sorry, we crush boundaries here. You know,
We did.
Guy won that race. In fact, there's a great photo inside of you up on a wheel, tongue hanging out, right? Coming around a turn there at that criteria.
You know what? That's that rivalry, you know, where you want to give a reason to watch and not to turn away, but a reason to look in, you know? And so that's, I guess, kind of what happened all those years.
Performing. That's what it is. It's performance art. And you were the best at it. Craig Blanchette again has been our guest. Again, Breakfast with Bob, not quite Kona edition. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. See ya.